Today we are talking about making post requests to a web API. So far we've been making GET requests. We've been consuming data from a web API, meaning we're getting data from a web API into our application. Typical example today, we made a GET request against the recipes API. We got back recipes. We presented the recipes in the table view. That's a GET request. That's an HTTP method. Please, no HTTP methods know what they mean, right? We've been doing them for like 2-3 weeks right now, or 2 weeks. HTTP methods we've seen so far is only GET. We've only used GET before. We go to Postman. By default, Postman has GET in there. But today we'll see what POST looks like. POST basically says, take my data, send it to the web API on my behalf. So I took a photo of some cool ice cream that I'm eating. I want to post it to Instagram. You see that posting to Instagram? So I want to send that data to Instagram. I make a post request, or the app makes a post request based on my user account, and it puts it on the Instagram's web API. Now other people could see it, right? So that's sending data to a web API. Posting is what you use. Post is that HTTP method we use, right? What's that? Yeah, put the link. So I slacked out a link. If we paste the link into Postman and keep GET as the default, everybody, make sure it says GET, not post, right? And we click send, we should get back results. Do we get back results? Right? So we have some results in there. Most of them are test data results, right? So we have our JSON coming in here, right? There's an ID for the lab. Basically, our application will be a lab questions application where a user could post a question about a lab, give the question a title, give it a description, what the lab is about, or what my question is about, right? Let me go to one that's a little better. For example, here, the title would be expecting a dictionary. That's what my error is. And description, I thought the top level was an array. Can anyone help me with this error? And the lab is parsing JSON, okay? So the user is able to send that information to our web API. Other users are able to see that question, okay? So here we're making a GET request. We're getting all the questions into Postman. That's GET. But today, we'll actually send information up and create a question, right? So our goal is to create a question, for example, right? And see the question show up when we make a GET request. So far, right? So I'm making a post. In a table view, I'll see if my post was made correctly. I should see that result. I should see that question populated in the table view. Again, post is sending data to a web API. Right? Posting data to a web API, sending data to a web API from an application here. Okay, so we said we're talking about post. Let me zoom in and down here. Our model will look very similar to this. We have a question model. The question model has a title. It has a lab name. It has a description. It has an ID, as we saw in the JSON. Our app, as we've seen Xcode so far, this is what the app looks like. Let's pay attention to the one that says lab questions. So lab questions is a table view of the title of the question, the lab. We'll also have a date in there. We're able to post by clicking on the add button. So when we click on the add button, we'll get a modal presentation. The modal presentation will have a title text field for us to put in the title of the lab, or the title of my question. I'll have a picker view to select which lab I'm referring to. And I'll have a text view to enter the description of my question, right? And the more thorough you are, the better, right, with the description of the question. For example, I'm working on the comic, so the title would be cannot get images, or can't get my comic image. And the description would be, I set up the stepper, I'm clicking on the stepper, I can't get an image to change from whatever, right? Everybody? Cool? So this is the objective of our post. And when we click on done, here, it sends that question to our web API. So that's the posting part of it. When I click on done, it posts my question to the web API. If I go back to my first table view, the lab questions table view, I should see that question in there. Everybody else should see the question. Any questions so far? Right? So there's the get. The get is the first table view with all the results of the questions. The post is where you actually create a question, and you post it by clicking on the done button in my UI. Any questions, Eric? Okay, MVP of the app. The app could be a big app, but we'll keep it simple for now. The MVP of it, user can post a question. Everyone else can see the posted questions. That's the MVP of the app. That's the basic of it. If we have time, or if come Monday we could have answers, somebody else could make a post with an answer. Everybody see where we're going with that, right? Andy, question? What's that, sir? Yeah, like a response, like a table view of responses. We could go really crazy, but we'll keep it MVP. MVP is to know how to make a post. That's it. That's the basic, that's the objective. Know how to make a post. The post topics, the big topics we'll be talking about, or the new topics we'll be seeing. We'll put decoder there. That's not decoder, dude. Let me edit this. Sorry. This should be encoder. We've seen decoder before. Right, Julia? So if we send in information, to a web API, we need to encode that object to a JSON data. We need to encode that object to data. We encode it. No longer are we using decoding. Decoding is when we get in from the web. Encoding is when we're making a post request. So today we'll see new classes. We'll see JSON encoder. We've seen JSON decoder before. We've seen it many places, many times. It's been 3 weeks about. We'll see URL request, right? We've seen it at a glance, but today we'll actually use it for its purposes. Because before URL request, we had URL. And URL by itself doesn't have all the functionality that a request has. A request, you could package more things in there. I could say the request has a body. I could say the request has a header. I could say the request has an HTTP method type. I could also say the request has a URL. Request is a bigger API than a URL. Okay? So we upgraded our network helper to accept a request and not a URL. Okay? Cool? Any questions so far? So those are the new areas we'll see today. And URL request encompasses all that new property here. HTTP method, we'll see what that looks like. It expects a data, and that data it's expecting is from our JSON encoder. So JSON encoder, from JSON encoder, we will be getting our data. So JSON encoder takes in our lab, our question, whatever, our Swift type. It takes our Swift type, it converts it to data. And on our request, we say request.http body equal to the data. And once we have that data, we could go ahead and make our network helper data task like we always do with URL session.
Is this something like if you are on like a post on Facebook, right? And like if you want to post on Facebook, sometimes like, or right, maybe not, like if you want to put a post, you could put a post like a video, you can put a comment on the post.
It's totally like Facebook. We have the Facebook app.
Or like when you want to put a review, you know how you put a title of your review, and then your review in there, and then like
Anytime you send in data to a web API, you post it. If you send in data, you post in or you update in, right? One of those functions, right? So today we're looking at post. There's also update. There's also put. There's also delete. All those are still HTTP methods. Exactly. The one we've seen right now, or so far, is get. Right? But there's so many more HTTP methods. Like I want to update a partial comment, or I want to update a partial document. There's stuff for that. But post is like a new document. I'm creating a new, exactly. I'm creating a new Instagram post.
And the reason why I asked you was like your review is kind of like you said you have a title, you have a body, and I know that your review you can put like your name in the title or where you're from, and the body, but also
At the end of the day, what button are you pressing?
The set, no, you post the post button.
At the end, you're posting, right? So,
Yeah, but not necessarily just that. I was talking about more something why. Like, you can say that in whatever box that you have to send your data. Because you could do like your information is a struct. Like when your model is, like that what information for this specific
yes,
part of the.
yes. And at the end of the day, it all gets sent to the web API, to Facebook in that case. Yes, Greg?
Is JSON the only language that I know it's what we're going to be working with here, but the only language we can go to?
So there's JSON, there's XML. JSON is the preferred data type we'll be using here.
Is that like
It's
considered universal in some sense?
universal, more popular, easier to work with. At the end of the day, it's easier to work with, easier to read.
If you had like put it to a percentage, would it be like 90% that are using JSON?
I would say 90%, or maybe less, maybe 80%, because there's still like a lot of XML out there. Xcode has XML, like Storyboard is XML. Yes, if you have a web API you want to convert to JSON, it's easier to read. XML, like RSS feeds, like if you're doing anything with podcasts, those are XML. But it's still heavy, like it's still heavily used because it's older. Again, like always say here, a language or platform doesn't die, right? It still needs to get supported. Podcast is still passing through XML feeds, but there's libraries for that, and XML is harder to parse than JSON. Yeah, cool. Very, very good. Cool. So those are the HTTP methods we mentioned. Posting is sending data to a web API. Any questions about context, where we headed? Can I send a what? Say it again. Can I send? Oh yeah, I'll send it at the end. I'll send it at the end. We'll all have it. You want it now, so you could look at it while we. Right. I'll send it right after. But we'll jump into the code. Let's jump into Xcode right now. Jump into Xcode. You'll get it, sir. Oh, I need to open the app, right? Do we have lab questions? We all have it, correct? It's in Slack. So open it up, make sure it runs. There comes the big ball. There's our activity indicator, by the way. It's letting us know that stuff is happening. Great. So let's run the app and see if we're all on the same page. A lot of the error. Wow, Xcode got mad at me. Did it crash? Okay, close, stop. Yes, sir. It's hot, right, Julia?
Yeah.
I know, I think there's just two people that love the weather or the temperature of the room. Yeah, I was saying I set up most of the UI because the foundation I want to talk about is posting, right? So I set up most of the scaffold for the UI of the application. If there's anything along the way that you guys want me to go over, please stop me so we could all be on the same page here. Okay, so the app starts off it has a table view. App starts off, it has a table view. If I click on this add button here, it presents us a modal view. Right? We're all comfortable with presenting modal views. I could dismiss my modal view by dragging down, or the cancel button doesn't work yet, but it should dismiss as well. And the create should also dismiss. But for now, I could simply drag down, it dismisses. Okay? Let's look at the code, and then we'll jump into starting to get. The first thing we'll go after is get the labs, the existing labs in the table view, because there's existing labs already. And that will do get request for. We have our app error. So from the top down, we have app error, which we all know by now. If anybody wants to stop me about anything that I'm going through, please stop me. App error encapsulates all our error cases in the network helper. We have our network, yes?
I have a question. Why did you don't do app why do you have to have separate stuff?
We separated it here because in that use case there, it's better to separate it as opposed to putting everything in the network helper. But you can put it in the network helper because everything goes together. Right? You could still put it in the network helper, but here we just broke it apart. Okay. Next question. Run it, you said? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Does anyone have an error that posted questions about the unresolved identifier?
Okay, I zoomed in. So we spoke about app error. Those are the cases in our network helper where we have errors. Our network helper, this is our network helper here. It's a singleton. We use a singleton. A singleton is a design pattern. We use a singleton because of the network, because of URL session. URL session, the Apple documentation says you should have one instance of URL session running your application at the same time. One instance. So anytime you have one instance, we could have used URL session not shared. We could. But we'll have that many places. So we encapsulated everything in this class called network helper. Itself is an instance, is one instance, is a singleton. And in that network helper, we have a function called perform data task. The way we access our network helper is via the shared instance here that we made as a singleton. The singleton is a singleton again because it's also private as far as like the initializer of it. The initializer is private. Initializer is private. Nobody else can create an instance of network helper. The only way they access the methods is via the shared instance. Okay? We have our perform data task. It accepts some URL requests. We updated that from URL. Before we had URL, now a request is bigger, especially with post. I need to package data in there. I cannot package data in a URL. A URL only is a string. Okay? Cool, so that's our network helper here. Any questions about network helper code? Being able to write it is something that you should be comfortable with, right? And knowing how it works is something you should be able to talk about, the parts of it, right? Because at some point, again, you lost as far as like the insides of network helper. You use it so many times, you're like, oh, I use network helper. Or you'll be interviewing or talking to somebody and saying, how do you get data from the internet? Oh, network helper. Where the answer should be URL session. Everybody with me? So I'll keep saying that until I'm horizontal. But please remember, URL session gets you the web access, not network helper. Network helper is a wrapper around URL session.
But we only call it network helper because that's what we call it.
Yes,
Network helper is known to
you'll see it most places. If they have some sort of network resource application wrapper, it might be called network helper or network manager or network service.
But it's but the whole reason for it is so that we can get the URL and say, well, so we can get the URL session.
Yes, so we wrap the URL session in that code. So we're not writing that many places, and we're not writing it every time we have a new application. You start off a new application, you just grab the network helper. I think Yulia's question is too, why not just have the app error tied in with the network helper so we just get in one class as opposed to having two files. As opposed to having one file, now you just grab one file. That's Yulia's question there. So why not just have app error inside of you could totally just do that. Cool?
You could put app error inside.
Yes, and not have two files. That's what Yulia was suggesting.
You just put the enum above the file.
Yes. That way, when you grab in it, you're just grabbing one file. But now we need 3 files because we do images. We love images, right? So we also have our extension, right? My objective over the break is to build like a framework so that we import our whatever we call it, and it has all that in there. So that's like my holiday project. Always looking forward to building new things. Cool. So next up we have our controllers. We don't have nothing in the model yet. We'll create the model, but the model is empty. Our controllers are empty. We'll have 3 controllers. The first controller will show all the questions. The second controller, called create question, is the one with the picker view. So if we go back to the app, the first controller here is called lab questions controller. Shows all the questions in the lab, or all the questions you have. When I click on my add button, that presents my create question controller. At some point when we have questions, we'll be able to select a question and go to the question detail controller, right? So MVP is 3 controllers. Next up, we have extensions. Let's talk about the extensions. We have a lot of extensions. Just one. You can. No. When we have questions here, we'll be able to select it and go to the detail of the question. Yeah, it's already in. It's set up already in Storyboard. If we look at Storyboard, it's there already. Storyboard, activity indicator. But if you look at your Storyboard, you have that detail already. It's connected already, right? If I look at here, and it's set up already as well, right? So when I click on my cell, I'll segue over to a detail view. It will show some image, the lab name, and the question description. If I click on plus, that means I'm creating a question. It's going to be presented modally, right? Questions? Luba is clarifying here. Any questions? So plus sign presents a modal view. The modal view has my text field. It has a picker, right? So I don't think have we done picker? No, we've done date picker, right? We've done date picker, so today we'll do picker view. And then the picker view, so far the only thing we've done is drag. The only thing we've done so far is drag a picker view into the storyboard, okay? And we have a text field here, not a text field, text view, and we have a text field. The text view, that's where you type in the description of the question. The text field is where you type in the title of the question. And then the picker view, you select what lab it is. And then you click done, and that's it. Cool. All right, so we have 3 controllers. Let's go to the extensions. We have a string extension here that helps us with date. Date is one of those things that could be very cumbersome or right to navigate. So we have a string extension to handle date for us. In our application, we'll create a date stamp so that we know what date that lab question was created. So those extensions there will help us with that. And as we're using it, we'll come and talk about it. Okay? As we're using each part of this extension, we'll come and talk about it. Okay? Keep in mind that this extension, you could as well use it in your own projects. At the end of the day, our extensions will be able to reuse them in different projects. Right? So the more decoupled your extension, meaning your extension doesn't only work with lab questions, right? It shouldn't. The more you can make it general, the better. That way you could take it to any project. Very similar to our set image or get image, we could take it to any project. Yeah.
And a way to do that is when you put it like a parameter, so
yeah, if you make the parameter specific to the project, it couples that function to that project. For example, if we say this takes like a lab question for whatever reason it takes it, then we cannot use it in a recipes app, or we cannot use it. A string is fine. That's generic, like a string of whatever. In this case, it knows it's a string already, so we could say self. Right? If you see self there, that means that's a string instance itself. So we'll come back and talk more about the string extension when we use it. We know what the image view extension does already. That does our image logic, right? If we want an image, that's the extension for it. The next extension here is the alert controller. We've written the alert controller once before where we presented a dialog to the user. Do you remember when we did the JSON parsing, right? We had a decoding error. Now we have an extension on the UI view controller. Any view controller, I could simply say show alert, pass it a title, pass it a message, and my alert gets shown. That's it. I don't have to type this code everywhere I want an alert controller. It's in the extension on UI view controller. Any UI view controller, it could be a split view controller, a tab bar controller, detail view controller, right? Cat and dog view controller, doesn't matter. I could say show alert, and that's it. Okay? Pass it a title, pass it a message, my dialog shows up. Okay? We could have different alerts here. There's many different use cases for alerts. I could have an alert that takes in on a next argument. I could have an alert that takes in a closure. Right? When we get more into alerts, this is going to be more. We won't only have one function there, we'll have more functions. You yourself, you could write your own little function there, but now this extension is yours. You could do whatever you want with it.
So if you want to use the controller and that show alert.
Not even the name, just show alert.
Oh,
Because right now the view is saying, it's like saying view, or it's like saying background color in a view controller.
okay. And you don't have to say self.
You don't have to say self. Exactly. Thank you. Coding style, you don't have to say self because it knows itself. What's that? Well, not in the view did load. I'll put it like wherever you have that error state or whatever you want to show the user. Like any point like where we have a print statement with an app error, for example, we could just say show alert. And it will have to be dispatch main if we're coming from a background thread. Because show alert is a UI element. Okay. Cool. So let's keep going here. We don't have to talk about AppDelegate right now. We have our SYN delegate, main view. Good. So let's get, first objective, let's get lab questions getting populated in our table view. Again, that's review, because we've done it many times, but we'll do it again. Let's do lab questions. We need an API client for it. Let's create an API client in our network services. Anything in our class. We'll do all of them in tandem. We'll create a model, we'll create an API client. Yeah, we're multitaskers, concurrency. Okay, cool. So let's create a new file here in network services. And we'll call it lab questions API client. That's okay. You know, ask them away. Ask them away. It's a Swift file, yes. It's not subclassing from anything. It's a struct, as a matter of fact. So struct, and we called it lab questions. Wow, I really need more cores. I'm like typing on hot coals. Well, hopefully it doesn't blow up in my face. All right, so we have our API client, right? Let's look at our model. Well, we know what we're fetching, right? Static func fetch questions. Fetch questions. We're not taking in any query from the user. So we simply have a completion handler because we don't have any query from the user. There's no search there. We could have search later, but not now. Angel got the wings. Completion here. After escaping, we have our closure. Keep in mind, you could just do void here. What does our closure take? A result type. Takes in a result type. And we're expecting, let's see our JSON again. If I go to Postman here. Array of questions, thank you. Boom, done. An array of questions. Love it. Pretty soon we'll be doing speed coding. Could be. So we have an array of questions. We know that'll give an error. It doesn't know what questions is. And then we have an app error. So we'll stop here and we'll create a question model. It's almost like test-driven development here. Cool. So let's go create a question model. So we'll go to our model folder, right-click on it, create a new file. It's a Swift file. Click Next. And the file name is simply question. Same group, models, lab questions, lab questions. Okay, so here we have a struct question. Cool. At this point, build, Xcode should be happy already because now it says question. It's going to be decodable as well. Thank you very much. We'll make it codable for now. We'll make it both just because we're not sure if we're encoding or decoding. We need to do both in that app. In that app, in this application, we'll be doing both encoding and decoding. Encoding when we're pushing up to the web. Decoding when we're getting information back. So far, so good. Okay. So let's actually do decoding for now, and then we'll come back if we need to change it. But now we need to get data. When we want to get data, this property needs to be decodable. Okay? What are we after? Let's go to our JSON. ID, we need that. So ID is what? What else we have? What else we have? Participation from the audience. We have name. There's not 10. I could do 10, but it's not 10. Avatar is a string. There's a lab name, right? Title, description, lab name. Did I just call the description? We have ID, we have created that. We'll be sorting our lab cells by date. We have the name. The name is the name of the random person, by the way. This is random people, random user name. Avatar is also some random image from the interwebs. Hopefully it's friendly. The title is what we provide, description is what we provide, lab name is what we provide. Created at, we'll be creating a date stamp from the current date. So here we'll be creating a date stamp. ID is the unique ID. It identifies the object. Cool. Now let's go to our API client. Let's go to our API client. And now question is available to us. Great. Question is available to us. We need our endpoint URL. I'll call it lab endpoint URL string. So that string will grab it from Postman. Verify that you do get back questions. So here I will grab the string that gave us back questions, and I'll paste it in here. So this is the endpoint we have. Let me get a URL. So create a URL. Yeah, the one in Slack. I slacked out one earlier.
That's exactly what we put.
Yeah, that's the exact. Yeah, but verify it works before you bring it here. Create a URL from the endpoint string. And here we will guard let URL equal to URL string, and this is lab endpoint. Else, we have our app error, we have our completion, so we could throw an error here, failure, bad URL, and pass it the lab endpoint URL. Great. Perfecto. Not bad. So here we have our URL, and we'll actually see using URL request today, like really fully use URL request. This is where we use it. So we need to make a URL request. Object to pass to the network. Okay. For our struct?
The question just conforms to the decoder, no?
Yes.
So mine is saying type question does not conform to protocol decoder. It's saying that it function coded past coding right? When I put fix, this is what it is.
Okay, cool. So we're making a URL request here. It needs to be a variable because we're mutating it. So we'll call it request. It's of type URL request. And it takes a URL. We'll pass it a URL. URL. Let me stop here for a second and go to the web and really talk about what URL request does. So, URL request. So URL request is part of Foundation, same as URL session is part of Foundation. URL is also part of Foundation. But here, URL request is a bigger API to use. Right? Here it says encapsulates two essential properties of a load request, the URL to load and the policies used to load it. Along with those policies, we could say what type of method it is here. What type of HTTP method? As we said earlier in the notes, we could say what type of HTTP method it is. We could also say what's the caching policy of it. We haven't spoken about caching. We'll talk about caching in Unit 4. We could say what type of header, what type of multimedia is expected. Is it HTML? Is it JSON? Is it XML? Right? All that we need to pass to the request. So the request is this big container that could be packaged with other properties that we need. In our post, we have properties that we need to pass. It's not a get. By default, every request is a get request. So we need to pass it an HTTP method saying, hey, this is a post now. It's a post. We need to tell the request it's a post. We're not doing a get anymore. We're making a post. So this URL request there enables us to package more items in our request. Yes, sir?
I just had a, so you said before that like there should only be one iteration
Of URL session. Yes.
If for apps that let's say get information from one URL, what do they do?
It's the same session you use. Like our helper is the same network helper. Regardless of what. Regardless of what view controller, it's the same session. Cool?
Sure.
Very good. All right, so we'll bookmark that, right? Like we bookmark everything else. Eric, what did you say? I heard you. All right, cool. Let's go back to our app and continue making the request. So, our request, we need to set the HTTP method. Example, we have get, we have post, we have delete, we have put, we have update, da 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 da. All right, those are HTTP methods. When you go to the interview, they ask you what's an HTTP method. You know what's an HTTP method. You've been using it from Unit 3. Cool. So here we have our HTTP method. How do we do it? On the request, there's an HTTP method. So here, there's a lot of things I could do on my request. The data we'll be using, HTTP method will be using. Those are the things we'll be using, but there's a lot more that you could package in that request, right? So let's do HTTP method, expects a string, we'll pass it a string, all uppercase, post. We want to make a post. Right? Other things we need to pass in here, we need to pass in some sort of data. So HTTP body, the body expects data. It could be nil because maybe you're making a request, a GET request. If you're making a GET request, there's no body. If you're making a POST request, there's a body. There's data. We are making a POST request. We are sending up a question. Right? So that body expects some data. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself though. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What's that? The body would be, the data body would be the question we send up. But here we're not posting, we get it, sorry. So I need to stop here for a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay? We don't need the post. We could say get here, but we don't need it because by default it gets. Okay? So keep that code here. We'll come back to it, but just not right now. Okay? Getting ahead of the game. So we simply have a request, not packaging anything extra. We simply get it. So we'll change this var to a let. Okay, sorry about that. And here we'll use our network helper, dot shared, dot perform data task. We pass in a request, it expects a request, and our completion is a result type. Okay. Again, our functionality is to get, not post. But later, when we post, we'll be doing the HTTP method and we'll be doing the HTTP body.
Is that going to be in the single?
No, we'll write a different function for it. Still uses network helper.
Okay.
But it won't be called fetch questions. It will be called post question. Okay? It will be called post question. And if we don't get to it, this is what it's going to look like for now. Not get to it, I mean, but today. We'll also have a request here that has like a set value on it. We'll come back to that when we talk about post, but I just want to show us where we're going and what that means. So here we'll set a value. The value is going to be application JSON because our data is of type JSON. So we need to tell the post what type of data it is. If we don't tell the post what type of data it is, the app will post some gibberish data, and when we try to decode, we'll get an error. So keep that in mind, please. This is required. I'll write it in when I say it next time. Let me write it in. Okay, so when we're making the post, keep in mind this is not a post. We'll get to the post later with a different function. But when we're writing our post request, we need to specify what sort of application information we're sending up. What is the data type? Right? We need to tell the post request what type of data. Is it HTML? Is it JSON? Is it XML? Because if we do not, our JSON won't be formatted correctly. And when we try to decode it, we'll get a decoding error. Okay? whatever the multimedia type is. And here, this is required when posting. So we inform the post request of the data type. If we do not provide the header value as application JSON, we will get a decoding error when attempting to decode the JSON. Okay. Just keep that here. We'll come back to it. Yes.
I have the same thing right now that I don't get an error.
What do you mean? Sorry. Oh, we don't have an error. Error from what?
It looks like when yours was uncommented, you have an error.
Oh, because this is a constant,
Oh, okay.
right? But we'll do it in post. This is just get. I want to show us what the difference is between get and post. This we'll need when we do the post later. For now, we're only doing a simple get. We only need a request with a URL. The what? Okay, let's keep going. So we're about to make a GET request to our URL session request there. We got back information in the closure. Let's see what the information is. Is it valid or is it an error? So we use a switch on our result type. We use a switch, and here we have a failure in the case of an app error, like bad URL, network is down, whatever it is. Or we could have a success where we have data. Okay, so if we have a failure here, we'll simply return what the error is. And here we'll say network client error and pass in the app error. If we do have data, we'll construct our questions array. So now let's go ahead and construct our questions array. Yeah. One of you guys should just do a document, like a cheat sheet for URL session stuff, from your point of view, like step 1 to 3. Cool. So here we have construct our question array, and let's do that. So here we have our do catch because JSON decoder could throw an error. If we in the catch block, that means we have a decoding error. So we'll simply say completion here. And we have a failure, and we'll say decoding error, error. And here we have our questions array. We try to decode it using JSON Decoder. Decode. What are we decoding? An array of questions. And we have data from the network helper. And here we have our questions. If we do get our questions successfully, we capture it in our completion block. Success. And we pass in questions. So that's our GET request. Not post, we haven't posted yet. But this is just getting information into our table view. Any questions about network helper or perform data task or request or our switch on our result type enum? Or questions about JSON Decoder? Again, JSON Decoder is used we get information from the web, we're converting it into a Swift type, we use JSON Decoder. Later, when we do posting, we'll be doing JSON encoder. Okay? So here, converting JSON decoder used to convert web data to Swift types, Swift models, and its brother or sister, sibling, JSON encoder used to send data or used to convert Swift model to data. Does that make sense? So one gets data to Swift models, one gets Swift models to data. Okay? Yeah. Why do we use error? You mean right here? That's an error thrown by the decoder error. So if I come in that catch block, it's only a decoding error. And I capture what that error is. That error is missing expected string got int, for example, decoding error. I don't pass the app error, I pass the actual error from the decoding error. The error that was thrown by this function. That comes from the framework, from the JSON decoder framework, right? And that's where you see if your array supposed to be a dictionary, or if you're looking for a string and you got an int, right? It's a descriptive error that tells you what your decoding error, your JSON decoding error is. Our app error is an error that we wrote ourselves. The cases we wrote ourselves. But the one we wrote is decoding error to specify it's a decoding error. What that error is, what the error is, we don't know unless we capture that actual error. And that error, we don't create that error. It's part of the catch block.
But the error is based on like what you have in the model that
Yeah, exactly. When it's about to decode here, if something goes wrong with the decoding, it throws an error on line 49. Cool? Yeah.
So I'm still trying to get the hang of like this using leak for self things. Do we not use
Yeah, anytime you see that, what are we capturing? Are we capturing any we're not capturing anything here, so that's fine. But if we're capturing like a self object, then we would.
Okay.
See that?
are you
We know.
I just didn't see you set up.
Not really.
No, go ahead.
So in the larger static function of fetch questions, aren't we capturing
Back in the view controller, we need to do weak self.
where
Yeah.
it's actually being used?
Yes. Anytime you're capturing a reference to a class, here struct is not a class. The struct is not a reference type. There's no reference counting because it's a struct,
Yeah.
right? Cool?
Okay, yeah, so I mean like when the function itself is actually being implemented.
In the view controller, and we have like a self.image view, that's what we do weak self.
Okay.
Or we have the table view, for instance. We have to do the update of the table view, or, right? Cool. Because we'll have like a self.lab questions, right? When we capture that self.dot there, we need to break that strong reference cycle in the view controller. Any questions about anything before we move on to the view controller here? Again, all that is review. The review started already. The review started Monday. We have new concepts along the way, but everything is review. So we're not expecting like a day of review. We have like 2 weeks of review, right? So we ask questions every day, all the time. We have our completion variable name. We have our escaping syntax. We have our closure here with a result type. We have our array of questions if success, or we have our app error if failure. Doesn't return anything. For the catch, do you have failure dot decoding error? Okay, cool. Very good. All right, let's move on to our lab questions. We have 13 minutes. We'll get data, right, Julia? Yulia's like, I can't wait to see data. Does this really exist? Okay. What do we need for our lab questions controller? What do we need? I have an empty view controller. What do I need? View did load. Nobody look at me laugh. I don't know why I'm laughing. Yeah, I need view did load to do something at some point, right? Okay, but before that, I have a table view, right, in the UI. So I need a table view, right? So I need an outlet to a table view. Table view, UI, table view. And we know if we have a table view what we need some sort of conformance to UI table view data source. So let's do that. Lab, questions, controller, conforms to UI table view data source. Great. And here I need some sort of array. Let's start doing private here, by the way. Private, so nobody else has access to my array of questions. And my array of questions is an array of questions. Stop me at any point, any syntax here that's like uncomfortable. Did set. Why do we need did set, Julia? What's that? Yes, to catch when questions changes and to update whatever UI we want. Already we know it's going to be a dispatch queue because we'll be coming back from a network request. So dispatch queue.main, bless you. And here we know we have self.tableview, reload data. So anytime our questions changes, we reload the data of the table view. Great. Next up, we come here and we say number of rows. How many items do we have? So number of rows, how many questions do we have? We return our questions array. Yes, yes. We'll introduce this. Also private, var, refresh, control. To answer your question, how are we going to get new data? UI. So nobody else has access to it. No other view controller could say lab questions dot table view, or not table view, lab questions dot questions empty. We need to start using access modifiers where we can. Right? If somebody else don't need public access to us, we mark it private. Cool. Good. And so questions that count. How many questions should my table view have? I return it. Now my table view knows how many questions to expect. The next thing my table view needs to know is what are those cells? What do the cells look like? What the cells look like is my cell for row. Cell for row. This is actually what my cell looks like. What's the configuration of it? So for each cell that gets returned to the table view, it needs to know what's the configuration of it. What does it look like? Return me that cell so I could show it. So here we will say let cell equal to table view. Let cell equal to table view dot dequeue reusable cell. We'll call our thing questions. I think it might be named already. Somebody could verify, right? Is it called question cell or question cell? Excellent. Thank you, May. And here we return cell. And we need to get a question. The question that is present here in that particular index path, we get it via the questions array, index path, that row. At this point, we have a question. The only thing we want to show for now, is cell.textLabel.text equal to question dot title. That's all we're showing for now. Of course, we'll show more later, tomorrow. We'll show the date, We'll show the date tomorrow. But for now, we're just showing the questions. Like, do we get back those questions? Okay. So we have our number of rows. We have our cell for rows. The next thing we need to do is open up our assistant editor and connect the table view. Option click on my lab. The computer should be faster than the brain. Okay, go to my lab table view here, right here, sorry. Right here. I want to connect that table view to my lab questions controller. So I go ahead, I drag over from my table view to my storyboard. Connected. So it's connected. We haven't done the refresh control. We'll come to that later. Not today. We'll come to it tomorrow. We'll talk about it tomorrow. The refresh control is basically, again, in Instagram. Sorry, that's my app of choice. When I pull down the table, you see the progress indicator, right? That's the refresh control. You pull down the table view, you get a spinner, more data loads into your table view. That's the refresh control. And we'll add that tomorrow. Okay? So when we click on the add new question, we come back to the table view, we pull to refresh, it refreshes the table view. Okay? Yes, sir.
A few of us were working on something with, I don't know, that the other day.
Okay.
And as far as like, you said we don't get really use the labels.
What do you mean?
For outlets.
You can make it strong because the table view is always around when the
So it's okay, like,
you can make it strong.
and once I did that with him, every time I connected an outlet, they're all strong.
You can make them strong because the outlet is always around as long as the view controller is around. Okay? But I like to go with the default what Apple gives us, right? Okay, so let's keep going here. So I have my questions, I have my table view. We need to now, Luba, we could have a view did load for Luba, right? To set up my delegate, or my data source rather. So view did load, or super view did load. And here I will simply say table view. Yeah, I'll talk about it right now. So we use super because if we override in a function, we have to call the super, we have to call the super class on that function. So the super class itself takes care of any implementation it needs to take care of. So we do that with all the override functions. Prepare for reuse, view did load, view will appear, is the UI view controller itself. Yeah. So we have our table view data source, that's happening here. Next up, we need to actually load the data. And here I'll simply write a fetch function. Again, this could be private function. I'll call it fetch questions or load questions. Load questions will simply call my API client, lab questions API client dot fetch. Let me get some more space here. Sorry. Lab questions, close this here. Okay. So I have my result type. I have my fetch questions. I call my fetch questions. I have my result type coming in. I will write a switch statement on it. On result. And my first case is a failure case. Let app error break here. And my next case is success. Here I have my questions. And in my questions, I have my questions array equal to questions. So my questions array gets set, and as you said earlier, Yulia, this set gets called, my table view reloads, and it shows me my questions. Now, this particular app error here, we could make use of our show alert. We could make use of our show alert extension that we wrote earlier, or that we showed earlier on the view control extension. Do we all remember the view control extension we wrote, right? So here I could simply say self show alert, pass in a message. I could say app error. And for the message here, I could string interpolate what the app error is. And Matt, this is where we break the strong reference. Because now we're capturing self in a closure, right? We're capturing self. Anytime you do self here, you capturing self. So now we'll go ahead and we'll break that strong reference cycle and make self optional, make questions optional. And lastly, we will call our load questions in ViewDidLoad. That Luba loves. Oh, look at that. We got it. 1 minute. Will we get data? That's a big question in 1 minute. So now at this point, you could run the app while my computer is overheating. And we have an error. Something is not connected somewhere. Let's see. Unsupported use of UI kit, main thread. We're doing something on the main thread. Somebody's not happy. Okay, let's go back. Where were we? Here? No, that might be here. Questions, that's okay. That's just like a variable. It's not UI. That's not UI. Table view is UI. We dispatch to main here. Is it an error here? So let me dispatch here because this should be on the main thread. This is UI updates. So take the show alert and put it in the dispatch queue main. Run the app again. And let's see what's happening. App error, decoding error. We have a decoding error. Decoding error, expected decode string but found a number. Okay. Let's look at created at. Created at, created at should be a number. Let's see the JSON. Created at is a string. What's happening now? Why is it a number? Is there one with a number?
Some of them at the bottom don't have.
Some of them at the bottom have numbers.
Created at. For now, let's comment out created at. I'll take care of that. That might be a bad piece of data on my part. So comment out created at. We're not using it right now. And run the app again. So two things. One, our show alert was not on the main thread, so it was breaking. Second, we have more errors here. What is it? No value associated with key title. Okay. Let's take a look at it here. Something bigger is happening here. Oh, because not all have the title. Okay, so let's make them optional here, which is weird because I fixed that earlier. It's one of those where the app itself was creating, lab questions without a title, right? So don't make it optional. We need to fix that. Just comment it out for now. Well, we're not gonna get a title. 1 second, I'll take care of that real time. Which one doesn't have a title? I will delete it.
Some of them don't have description.
1 second, I'll fix it.
Can you just do all of them?
No, we don't want to do optionals. There shouldn't be optionals. Luba, you have to fix the problem, not put a band-aid on the problem. Title. Let me send this. What's happening here? Okay, I see it. So it's 1 second. Real-time fix. With the optional, but we don't want optional titles. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what happens here. Unless there's a rogue. Unless there's a rogue agent. Let's see what's happening. I cleaned up the API a little bit. Okay, great. So please, if you have optionals, move the optionals. Because our every lab should have a title. Okay? So at this point, do we all have data in our table view? Right? We all have data? Okay, cool. So we'll stop here. Tomorrow we'll come back and we'll go right into posting. So tomorrow we'll come back and where we'll start off is clicking on that add button, add in some data, and clicking on the create button and post, make a post request. Okay? So tomorrow, this is where we'll continue making that post request. And to review or to preview, please, to preview tomorrow, if we go back to our API client, our function will be very similar to this fetch questions, but the differences between that will be the request part of it. Our request tomorrow will have an HTTP method called post, right? It will have some data that we need to create from our question object, and we need to have this set value and say the application is JSON and the content type. Those are the things those are the 3 parts we require tomorrow. Okay? So for post, this is what we require. Okay? And that's what we kick off tomorrow. Any questions so far? Basically, that was a review with the get part of it. Tomorrow, new with post part of it. But as far as like posting, we know what extra parameters we need for posting tomorrow. Cool. Thank you.